A very interesting piece of lore in the Naruto series is that Nagato's Rinnegan eyes are not actually his eyes, the eyes that he was actually born with. No, they were Madara's eyes that Madara himself transplanted onto Nagato. Many people still believe that the Rinnegan was actually Nagato's and that he was born with it, just like he says, oh, I am the reincarnation of the Sage of Six Paths, therefore I have the Rinnegan. That's mostly because a lot of people just watched or read Naruto once, and obviously you're not gonna remember every single detail. But the reason why Madara transplanted the Rinnegan to Nagato is because Madara only awakened the Rinnegan right before he died of old age, and because the Rinnegan was paramount for Madara to fulfill his goal of casting the infinite Tsukiyomi, he couldn't do so with such a decrepit body. Therefore, he had to entrust the Rinnegan to someone that could handle its power, aka an Uzumaki, because Nagato is an Uzumaki, so that eventually Obito would brainwash Nagato into creating the Akatsuki as a terror organization that would collect every single tailed beast, and after that, cast Rinne Tensei and revive Madara at his peak state so that Madara can return and cast infinite Tsukiyomi. And everything was very well thought out, because Obito goes there and says, oh yes, the Rain Village and this land of yours, it's a small nation that suffers because of the conflict between the 5 major nations. You are the one who is supposed to bring peace, and that's why the Rinnegan awakened here. You are the reincarnation of the Sage of Six Paths. Classic gaslighting. He did it very well, making Nagato believe that, okay, yeah, these eyes are mine because I am the chosen one. But he was just a smaller tool in Madara's great plan. The first time we learned that Nagato's Rinnegan are not actually his real eyes, but Madara's eyes, is when Obito fights against Conan, and Obito's obviously posing as Madara, so he says, oh yeah, by the way, those Rinnegan eyes, they're not his, they're mine. I just came here to collect them back. And then we get further confirmation in Obito's flashback when he is with Madara as an old man. Spiral Zetsu tells him, yeah, that's the guy with the Rinnegan, go and gaslight him. So this is just a fact of the series that some people may not know, but it's just a cool, interesting fact. And also pretty important to understand the scope of Madara's plan. But there's a deeper, more interesting, and even weirder question that people don't usually ask, which is, how did Madara transplant his Rinnegan eyes onto Nagato? Because if you think about it, there's a slew of problems when it comes to that. Spiral Zetsu tells Obito that Madara did so without Nagato or anyone else realizing what he had done. But how did Nagato not realize? Sure, he was a little kid, but something would be strange, right? Like this old man captured me and then, gouged my eyes out and put other eyes inside my sockets? Sounds weird. Sure, I can understand maybe his parents didn't watch over him for a certain period of time, Madara used that time to get Nagato and then do so, but Nagato himself, he should have noticed something, because you can even argue, well, Madara just put him under a genjutsu. However, I would assume that gouging out your eyeballs would inflict a substantial amount of pain, and pain is what you need in order to break out of a genjutsu, so it's like, it doesn't matter if you put him under a genjutsu, if you're gonna take his eyes out, he's gonna wake up. Another issue is how on earth did Nagato's eyes heal so well and manage to essentially be reconstructed by Madara's surgery? Now yes, there's precedent for that when Rin transplanted Obito's eye into Kakashi's sockets. Obviously in real life, transplanting an eye isn't something as easy. Rin transplanted Obito's eyes into Kakashi, and Kakashi is fighting using that eye a few minutes later. I'm pretty sure if you do an eye transplant in real life, it'll take a while for your body to even start seeing again, so that's just a little weird. But then again, you could say that Rin healed Kakashi's eye when she transplanted Obito's eye into his socket, which is true, though I'm not so sure if Rin's ninjutsu capabilities in terms of healing are very good, because when she was healing Obito, for example, in those flashbacks, she was using bandages to wrap his wound instead of healing it with ninjutsu, which seems much more practical, so she's definitely not a specialist. And Madara doesn't have healing ninjutsu as far as we know, so what did he do to Nagato's eyes? Sure, you could probably say that, oh, Nagato was a little kid, so he had time to heal his eyes and start to see again. And then when we go to the work, when they were changing eyeballs like they changed light bulbs, that makes more sense, because most of the characters that were changing eyeballs and getting new eyes, Madara and Obito mostly, they had Hashirama cells, which have regenerative properties, so yeah, you could just heal the eye connection as you put the eye into your socket. So that makes more sense. Nagato, though, didn't have Hashirama cells, but I guess we can just run with that premise that, oh, it's different in Narutoverse, we can give them some leeway. Another issue is, how did Madara even see what he was doing when he was transplanting the eye? Because if Madara is gonna give Nagato his own eyes, he's not gonna have eyes to see anymore, so how can he do the surgery? Now, maybe you can argue it was White Zetsu, because Black Zetsu wasn't an NC in that point of the story. Madara, quote-unquote, created Black Black Zetsu as he was about to die and let Obito take over as Madara. But this wouldn't really work because Spiral Zetsu even tells Obito, yeah, Madara transplanted the eyes, not me or not White Zetsu. And to be honest, I don't think the Zetsus would even have the expertise to do something like that. It has to be someone very intelligent and experienced like Madara. But we know that Madara has a Sharingan eye in the flashback that he got from somebody else. He even tells Obito, oh, if you're gonna give up and die here, I'm just gonna keep your Sharingan, because at the moment I do not have a left eye, and you can actually see that Madara as an old man only had one Sharingan that he stole from somebody else, because obviously his real eyes were with Nagato. And the thing is, Madara was very much out of Sharingans in his stock, because he only had one eye. There's no reason why he wouldn't have two if he had access to more Sharingan, and he even says he needs more Sharingan, so there's that. Of course, later on, Obito, because of the Uchiha clan massacre, manages to collect like a bazillion Sharingan that he keeps in that lab of his, and uses them mostly to cast Izanagi with his left eye. But at that moment in time, Madara only had one Sharingan, which we can probably assume he collected from a fallen Uchiha during the Third Great Ninja War, because it was raging on at that time. Uchihas were being sent into the war, just like anybody else in the Leaf Village, so much so that Obito quote-unquote died in that war. We can assume that White Zetsu simply went to the battlefield after a particularly gruesome battle, found an Uchiha with a Sharingan that was dead, collected the Sharingan, and left. Maybe the Uchiha was too damaged, so he only had one Sharingan left. Madara takes out one of his Rinnegan, implants the Sharingan into that socket, and then takes out the other Rinnegan once he's able to see with that Sharingan again. And because Madara is imbued with Hashirama cells and is connected to the Gedo Mazo so that he can survive in that very old state, he can probably regenerate pretty quickly and get the connection to the eye fast. And also, we assume here that Madara has means to preserve those eyes, just like Obito has in the present day. It's probably like formal or something like that you can just put something in and it's not going to rot. So yeah, it surely doesn't help that Madara only had one eye, because it really affects her depth perception, and I'd assume this would be a pretty big deal during a very precise surgery, but it's Madara, he can probably handle it. Another problem, however, is how did Madara even go to Nagato in order to do the surgery? Because, as I said before, Madara had to be connected to the Gedo Mazo, which had Hashirama cells and chakra, to keep him alive at all. Like, once he disconnects himself from the Gedo Mazo, he dies a few seconds later from old age. So Madara himself certainly could not have gone to the Rain Village, collect Nagato, or even do the surgery in the Rain Village on Nagato. Especially because he specifically states that I awakened the Rinnegan as I was about to die of old age. So he was already really freaking old when he had to transplant the eyes. The most likely scenario is that Zetsu probably snatched Nagato and brought him back to the cave so that Madara could transplant his eyes there. But how did White Zetsu even do that? I mean, sure, we know that White Zetsu brought Obito to Madara's cave, but Obito was very much unconscious after the rock hit him famously. Did Zetsu get Nagato while he was asleep? Because I think he would have woken up in the meantime. Well, they probably used something like anesthesia. We know that medicine is actually somewhat advanced in the Naruto-verse. There are medical ninjas that don't just do medical ninjutsu. They actually perform procedures and things like that, such as when Tsunade removed the sand from Rock Lee's spinal cord. And in order for that to happen, we have to assume general anesthesia is a thing in the Naruto universe. Maybe it's a pretty new thing, but it certainly exists. We just don't know if it would exist at that particular time, because Madara had to transplant the Rinnegan onto Nagato when Nagato was very young, and Nagato died at 35 years old in Naruto Shippuden, so the transplant would have to happen about 30 years before the series started. Maybe a little less, maybe like 27, 26, 25, but a pretty long time, and technology would definitely not be at the same level as it was in the beginning of the series. But I guess you could say because of ninjas like Tsunade, who developed a lot of medicines and things like that, then anesthesia would be a thing as well in that time period. So you could just use the anesthesia on Nagato, kidnap him from his house, and still use the same anesthesia to keep him subdued during the procedure. But there are still a few problems with this. AKA, how did Nagato and his parents not notice that his eyes were different? Now, there are two ways to think about this. Number one, Nagato's eyes ever since the transplant were just Rinnegan eyes and he couldn't revert back. And that's why every time we see Nagato before his Rinnegan awakening, or the first scene we see him with a Rinnegan in the flashback, he has his bangs covering everything and you don't see his eyes. That would be just absolutely ridiculous. How would his parents not notice that the boy has different purple, weird-looking eyes. And Nagato himself, like, maybe he was hiding his eyes with the bangs so that his parents wouldn't notice his eyes changed because he was afraid something weird was happening to him, which he probably would be. But he seemed very surprised the first time he used the Rinnegan, or even when he realized he had different eyes. So I suppose you could say that's probably not the case. The most likely scenario is that Madara implanted his eyes as regular eyes that are not in the Rinnegan state and not even in the Sharingan state. And I talked a lot about this in my Why Sasuke Cannot Deactivate His Rinnegan video, but Madara actually can revert his Rinnegan eye back to other previous states. We get confirmation of that when one of his clones reverts his Rinnegan to the Mangekyo Sharingan in order to cast a Genjutsu on the Raikage. Madara also managed to swap freely from his eye states in the beginning of the Gedo Tensei fight, starting off with a 3 Tomoe Sharingan, then moving on to the EMS, and then to the Rinnegan. He was activating those when he needed to. And when I claimed that he could do so because of his feat with the Raikage, some people were saying, no, actually Madara can't do that. He can just swap Rinnegan to Mangekyo Sharingan, but that makes no sense. If you can revert it back to the Mangekyo Sharingan, you can also revert the Mangekyo back to the regular Sharingan, and the regular Sharingan back to the regular eye. So Madara has the ability to revert his eyes back to their original state. Technically, they're not Madara's eyes, they are Izuna's eyes that were transplanted onto Madara, and then he awakened the EMS through them, and then those eyes became the Rinnegan. Madara transplanted those eyes into Nagato, so Nagato actually has Izuna's eyes that Madara used to awaken his eternal light. It's very confusing, but you get the point. Madara just transplanted his black eyes, his regular looking eyes, into Nagato's socket. But even if that's the case, you still have different eyes. Like, what would you think if one day all of a sudden you woke up with eyes of a different color? Like, oh, my eyes were brown yesterday, but today they're like blue. That was weird. What's going on? Eye color can change, especially when you are young, but it would be something to note, right? Madara's black eye color could be pretty similar to Nagato's original eye color. If you look at other Uzumaki clan members, Kushina, for example, had black eyes, but it doesn't seem like eye color is something uniform in the Uzumaki clan, and especially if one of the parents is not Uzumaki, because obviously Naruto has blue eyes. He didn't inherit pretty much any of Kushina's physical traits, like his blonde has blue eyes. Everything came from Minato. Obviously he got Kushina's chakra and stuff like that, but you get the point. It doesn't seem like the eyes are such a big deal for the bloodline of the Uzumaki clan. Karin, for example, has red eyes. So in theory, Nagato could have eyes of any color, but let's assume they were probably black, or at least similar enough to Madara's original eyes so not to raise any suspicion. So the timeline of events would be the following. Madara would awaken his Rinnegan. He would then task Zetsu to find a lost Uzumaki, someone that could handle his Rinnegan, that had a lot of chakra and powerful chakra at that, and specifically a young kid, so that it would be easier to brainwash him eventually in order to bring Madara back and collect all the heal beasts. Madara then implanted that regular Sharingan in one of his sockets and removed his Rinnegan eyes. White Zetsu kidnapped the young Uzumaki he found after injecting him with powerful anesthesia, making sure the boy will remember nothing about that day. Maybe a day that Nagato's parents weren't home, or maybe White Zetsu did something in order to distract Nagato's parents, to make sure they wouldn't notice their son was missing. White Zetsu then brought an unconscious young Nagato back to Madara's cave where he could stay alive by being connected to the Gedo Mazo. Madara removed Nagato's original eyes as he was affected by the anesthesia and implanted the Rinnegan eyes, deactivated at the original black state, not to raise any suspicion. Now the problem is, how did he heal Nagato's eyes? Because it would have to be quick in order for nobody to notice. Like, the procedure had to be something fast. But it seems like it works out fine. When Obito transplanted Itachi's eyes into Sasuke's sockets, he recovered after a day or so. So maybe Nagato couldn't see for a day. Oh, he's just sick or something. His parents could have rationalized. White Zetsu brought him back to his parents. Nobody noticed he was absent. And then when his parents were killed and he had that fit of rage, Madara's eyes turned from the dark standard state all the way to the Rinnegan, because it's the final stage of the eye anyways. And Nagato, quote-unquote, awakened the Rinnegans. And once Nagato's eyes manifest the Rinnegan, he can no longer turn them off because he's not an original user. We see that this is the case, for example, when Kakashi is unable to turn off Obito's Sharingan and has to use a headband to cover his eye in order not to spend all his chakra. And then so long as Nagato has Madara's eyes, he will forever bear the Rinnegan in his face. So this is how Madara transplanted his Rinnegan eyes into Nagato's sockets without anybody noticing. Watch this other video right here to find out why Sasuke cannot deactivate his Rinnegan. Like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And thank you so so much for watching.